Welcome to the Classroom Podcast. As I mentioned on the last episode, this was the final episode that me and the professor did. And as you guys know, Professor passed away on December 18th. I was trying to think about when did we record this episode, but I could not pinpoint the exact date. I know it was either the end of November or was the beginning of December. So it has to be at least the last weekend of November or the first weekend of December. One of those. I could not figure out the exact date we did. But anyway, this was the final episode that me and the professor did. Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, Book 3. Enjoy it and keep learning, man.
Are you there?
Oh,
you don't have it. Yeah.
I'm here now.
Okay, gotcha. Don't hurt yourself.
I'll try not to. Yeah.
You're getting to be an old guy like me. Things like that can,
I know. Feel like the old age is creeping on me.
Oh, yeah, well, the bad news is it stops creeping and starts speeding.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Man.
There we go.
Now we back.
We are back for sure.
Yeah.
And what a joy.
Oh, man. It's been a while.
It has.
And a lot of things happened since then.
I've noticed that, especially in your life.
I know. Election, I got married.
Yeah, moved.
So it's like everything hit at once. But
Yep.
all the good thing.
All the good things. That's right.
Professor, how are you, man?
I'm great, brother. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be sitting back here with you.
I know.
And we got interesting stuff to talk about, and
we always do.
We do, but Aristotle for me is close to the peak.
What do you mean?
That I think I've learned more studying up for our talks.
Oh, really?
Even more than Plato, which surprises me. And I still love Plato, of course.
Yeah.
And Socrates. But it's so fascinating how he goes about things. A lot of scholars find him hard to read for understandable reasons. Mm-hmm. But part of the problem is they forget, even though they're brilliant scholars, that Aristotle wrote this book we're talking about now, the Nicomachean Ethics, and his book about politics were all one book.
That's a big book.
Big book.
Yeah.
And scholars kind of have a habit of narrowing things down as much as they can so they can study them in depth. Makes perfectly good sense. But what happens here is they'll pick up the book we're talking about, the ethics, and look through it and try to understand it in its own terms, which is fine if it's a standalone book. But it turns out it takes both halves of the book to understand either half of the book. And we'll hit that when we do the politics next, too.
Okay. So the Nicomachean Ethics, the politics is a continuation of the ethics.
Correct.
So it's just like the same, almost continuation of the thought.
Exactly. That's well put. Continuation of thought. And it's very consistent with the ancient Greek writers' understanding that ethics and politics always go together.
So did he split the book or the future generation did?
Probably the student that inherited all of his writings, his name was Eudemus, lived on the beautiful island of Rhodes. Tough life out there, I'm telling you. Wait till you get there.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. But he's the one that sorted through and put them in an order and collected them together, like here are the works about logic and here are the works about ethics. And incidentally, Aristotle wrote another book about ethics besides the one we're looking at, called the Eudemian Ethics, and we think it's called that because Eudemius was the one who worked with his writings and got them in order, and bless him for saving all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
and making it able for all of these writings of Aristotle to be passed along, at least until the Middle Ages or early Christianity, let's say. So people kept copying them. But, printing didn't start till like the 1450s. And so they could have been lost along the way. In fact, some of his writings didn't make it. He wrote dialogues too.
Who, Aristotle?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
None of them survived.
What is your thought about splitting those books? Do you think it's a good idea or was not? Because now I'm thinking about Aquinas.
Okay. Aquinas in the sense of he's got like the Summa Theologica is 5 volumes, right? Yeah.
Imagine you put all those as one book.
Well, yeah, you can look at my bookshelf. It's the 5 volumes are about like that. Fortunately, they're the way Aquinas wrote them, each volume kind of has a central topic. But it's the same problem. If you really want to understand what's in the middle of volume 2, you really got to understand all the rest of it.
Yeah.
No small.
Yeah, that's not a small task.
Not a small task. The advantage, of course, of dividing these into smaller books is you can lift them. As long as you remember that there's multiple volumes.
Okay.
But again, it's such an attraction to scholars to focus as narrowly as they can on a topic they're really interested in, and then tend to just let it slide out of their minds that there's another whole volume that pertains to this, that Aristotle wanted you to know about pertaining to this, but you forget it in trying to get your book published.
Mm-hmm. What is the danger with the scholars to stop thinking instead of read the whole thing before they write about what they think Aristotle was talking about? Because if you miss the continuation of a thought, you might misconclude.
Oh, sure. And I'm trying to be fair to these scholars because they're brilliant. They're a lot more brilliant than I am.
No, I don't know about that, but go ahead.
I can assure you of that. I've worked with some of these people. They do. I mean, if they want to write a book about this ethics that we're reading, they'll read it through several times all the way through, right? And they'll say, well, I've looked at the book. Now I have these. They'll have a long list of questions, just like you do when you're getting ready for our talk.
Yeah.
And so these are puzzles that I want to talk about and see if I can make sense of them and see if I think scholars before me have understood it correctly. And you can get so wrapped up in that, and I do it. I mean, so you get wrapped up in that, and it just slides out of your mind that maybe I should see if there's some relevance. We're going to talk about friendship a lot later on. Of the friendship here, if there's something in the politics part that's really relevant to that, and there is. You and I can talk about those because I've been struck about how the two halves of the book interact. And also, I've discovered, which is interesting, and I've learned this from the scholars that I've been looking at, is how closely sometimes Aristotle is to Plato. In other words, he will pick up an idea from Plato's Protagoras, let's say. So you go back and you look at that now, after you've looked deeply at Aristotle, and say, I see where he's coming from. He's taking that idea that Plato had, he's going further with it, he's trying to make it more coherent. If he disagrees with Plato, you hear about it.
Yeah.
He's not subtle. But it's now even more fascinating to read Plato's dialogues because you can look forward to see what Aristotle has done with it.
Yeah.
And we're just hitting that part now in book 3 where we're going to start talking about essentially political virtues, a kind of political virtue that we encountered in Protagoras. So,
book 3, since you just mentioned it, I don't know what do your book say, but the title of the book 3 is Preconditions of Virtue. That's what mine.
Yeah, that's not, Aristotle never put that title in there, by the way. That's somebody like
else.
Eudemius or some much later than that, I would guess. Preconditions, I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay.
It starts right out talking about what's voluntary and involuntary.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. The first line say virtue is about feelings and actions.
Yes, first sentence.
Yeah. Talk to me. Because I was not thinking about feelings. I was thinking about actions.
Yep.
That feeling threw me off.
Yep, and especially when you see words like virtue, because we judge virtue usually by what happens, an act. Somebody does something.
Yeah.
You help a little old lady across the street, and everybody says, oh, look at what a nice guy Eric is. He helps little ladies across the street. So that's a very virtuous action. But the actions are always preceded by feelings. Right?
Okay,
right?
I see.
So feelings are causative agents in us. And for example, when he's going to call it, the translators call it virtue most of the time. I don't like that word, but we'll come back to that later. The first virtue he talks about is courage.
Yeah, yep.
Right? And what's courage about? It's about dealing with the feelings of fear. Right? How do you handle fear? Fear just comes on us. If you suddenly, pull a gun on me, I'm going to have an instant feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be a positive one. I'm going to be terrified. Right? So I have the feeling. It shows up spontaneously. I don't think I can, or any human can literally control himself to the point where he can say, I don't fear anything at all. There's something that would be literally wrong with you if you didn't fear anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's inhuman. It's
inhuman, yeah.
But also stupid.
Oh, yeah.
in a very serious sense.
Yeah. Because he really talked a lot about courage.
Yeah, and why do you suppose that's true?
Why he talked a lot about courage?
Yeah, why does he care about courage so much?
I think out of all virtue, I think if you don't have courage, you're probably not going to be able to have any other virtue.
Okay, because you'd be afraid to...
Yeah.
Okay. How about, what does he say? What kind of fear is the most admirable to overcome? I mean, we fear lots of things. We could fear lots of things. Right now, I'm afraid what my wife sent me out to get at Menards after you finish, I will come back with the wrong thing because I do that. So there's a certain amount of fear there. But what's the most admirable fear you can overcome?
No, I don't know.
The most admirable, he says, the most admirable fear to overcome is fear of death. Because that's what everybody fears the most.
Yeah.
Except Socrates. Says,
yeah. But some people don't fear death at all.
Yeah. But they're insensible then.
Yeah.
Like me.
But I mean, you just don't fear death because you accept it. That's nature.
Well, it's nature, plus it's pretense of knowledge that you know why it would be fearful. Because nobody comes back and tells you.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you think you know you should be afraid of it, you're mistaken because you don't know anything. That's Socrates' argument.
Okay.
Right? But Aristotle goes further. Not only is it overcoming the fear of death, but it's overcoming the fear of death in battle, in war. And this is going to be always important for ancient Greeks because on average, get this, if any ancient Greek city you live in, on average, you're going to be going to war 2 out of every 3 years. Most of them minor affairs between just 2 cities. like Mason City and Clear Lake, and they're fighting over possession of the land around the airport or something fairly insignificant. It's not like you mobilize everybody in your army, which is all the men between 16 and 60, but you have to mobilize enough to have the conflict. And so any Greek male is going to be aware of this idea that you could die in these battles, even the rather insignificant ones, let alone something like the Peloponnesian Wars. So there's that, and then Aristotle goes one step further. The most admirable fear to overcome is the fear of death in battle, defending your city. Why would he say that? Well, losing a battle in those days wasn't most of the time, but could be devastating in the sense that your city would literally be obliterated. And there are stories about this during the Peloponnesian Wars. Remember Thucydides going through some of these. You go out and you lose a battle, the other guys win.
They take over your city.
Well, worse. They kill every male who's in that range who can be a fighter, 16 to 60. They enslave all the women and children and take them off to their city, and then they tear down all the walls to your city, so there won't even be a city there. So the price of losing is humongous.
So would Aristotle kind of, I wouldn't say self-serving, but was almost try to push that fear of death. If you conquer that, you're more admirable for the young people who will join the military, that, hey, don't be afraid to die fighting for your city. That's honorable.
It's the most honorable thing. So, and it's not just for the men, right?
Yeah.
Because all of us, we'd like to have all the pretty girls admire us. We'd like to have the kids admire us. So it's a broader scope, even though, Aristotle's going to say, being honored, which is what we're talking about, isn't what you want. In a way, it doesn't matter if people honor you, although he'll have some modifications we'll see when we talk about Book 4. You did the right thing. That's the important thing. So I managed to control my fear of dying in battle and defending my city so it didn't get obliterated. It's not that I deserve something for that. It's that
I did what I was supposed to do.
Yes, and what you're supposed to do always, and we may need to have a little digression here, but we'll see. What you always should do is try to live the perfect life in the sense of always manifesting or doing what's best in your nature as a human being. No small order of that.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's get back to defending the city, too. We're going to be talking the politics about cities, right? What kind of citizens do you want in your city? I want the guy who's not going to be afraid to die trying to keep me alive, right? So, in our society, we often say we're really proud of those who serve in the military, and that's the same emotion that goes with that. Thank you for helping me stay alive another day or two or year or many years, we hope. So it's in a way the same kind of thing. Political organizations, let's say political communities, right? That's a community that has a governing structure, depends upon the individual citizens manifesting human virtues as best they can. Once that stops, if that's not a goal anymore, what's going to happen to the political community?
Falls.
Done.
Yeah.
So
that goes back to the collapsing of society. You reminded me about that thread that you stopped putting together on the Facebook.
Yeah, you up to date on that? I think I did one yesterday.
Oh, did you?
I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before.
Okay, I need to check that out.
At some point, soon, because it's not going to be a long thread. I'm going to copy them off Facebook and put them together sensibly, and I'll give you a
Okay, that would be nice.
order.
Yeah.
And then my plan is to, because I've enjoyed thinking about that stuff, is use that as a basis to expand that so that it becomes a real essay instead of just a
nice.
read.
Nice. Because I think it's a very important conversation to have.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I've framed it in the best way, but it was the way that I've been starting to understand it.
Yeah.
And so it's a starting point. And
I mean, sometimes it doesn't matter how you put the charcoal. You just need to get the fire going.
Got to get well put. I like that. I'm going to try to steal that for the thread. But I've my sister's been a good critic. My sister, no, my daughter has read it with interest, and you've had some really good questions, and she's had some really good questions, and she's more than willing to argue with me about things.
Oh, yeah.
And that helps immensely. As we know, it's conversation that gets us forward.
Oh, yeah. And I think we all interested in making sure, because nobody benefited for our society collapse.
You're so true.
Yeah, so I think we all benefit in understanding the previous society, why they collapsed, and what is the danger that we need to be paying attention to. And like I replied to one of your posts that we tended to think we got it.
Yep.
Like, oh yeah, we know what happened to the previous generation. Experience has always shown us the current societal generation always think they got it better and they understand this way better than previous generation. Those guys did not even know how to read and write. They have no idea.
Right.
They're primitive.
Right.
Society. That's why they fell. And then we ended up falling into the same traps as they did.
Or worse.
Yeah. You're right, probably worse, because now we think we're way smarter
Yep, we
than
think
them.
And what we've become is way more destructive.
Yeah, because at least for them, they knew they were ignorant, so there's like, we're trying to learn something here.
Right, and the worst damage I can do to you if you disagree with me is throw rocks at you.
Yeah.
And now look what we're throwing around.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen the latest Russian missile?
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah. Back to book 3 of Aristotle. As a matter of fact, before I go there, I was having a conversation with Scott maybe 2 weeks ago, because I came over here, and I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but right now, me and Professor and our friend Bill, we are reading St. Thomas Aquinas, kind of the introduction to who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you mentioned this. You say he's one of the top 5.
Top 4.
Top 4 intellectuals
Yep.
that you believe to be.
Right.
So I was talking to Scott. I'm like, yeah, where do you put him on the top 10 intellectuals of all time? And he's like, it depends if we're talking about the church. Yeah, he's going to be up there on the top 5. But if we're talking intellectuals in general of all time, I don't know if I'll put him on the top 10.
Yeah, no surprise.
Yeah, I was like,
Scott and I have talked about those kind of things.
Yeah, I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
So, and then we didn't finish about his top 10. Because here's your top 5. See if I get it right. So you have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas.
Right. And I don't even have a 5 because
5, you got a 4.
As far as I'm concerned, number 5 is so far below that I don't even consider them, basically.
And then modern intellectual? Oh, maybe the last 100 years? Beside John Stuart Mill?
Well, I wouldn't even include him, but I like John Stuart Mill a lot. I've read a lot of other philosophers. Yeah. It's not, I said I just ignore them, but to me, they're just not as satisfying intellectually as the top 4.
What is separate the 4? I mean, I understand the 4. They're very, very distinct intellectual.
Right.
And maybe, probably they had, like Socrates, they had original ideas.
Very.
And most of these other ideas, even from other philosophers, offshoot. I mean, it's built on those
Absolutely.
ideas. Is that what separate them?
Not exactly. It's how much. Let me put it this way: starting out as a very ignorant person, like I am still, I learn more and understand more from reading those top four than any of the other ones.
Huh.
Okay, so I don't want to belittle their intelligence. I mean, Rene Descartes was a genius. So was John Locke and Hobbes, and we can go up to John Stuart Mill in that crowd too. St. Augustine, if you want to go back in history. And I've read them.
Yeah.
And I found them very interesting. But I come away with greater understanding when I'm reading about Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas. And that's why I enjoy reading them the most, because they're helping me get rid a little bit of my ignorance and replace it with a little bit of understanding.
Yeah.
And I don't get that from other guys.
You reminded me. Yeah, you reminded me can't remember the guy who wrote the couple volume of Civil War, and he was talking about Shakespeare.
Yeah, Steele, is that the guy's name?
Yeah, what is his first name?
I can't remember.
He passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And he had a section at his home. There was, I think, a PBS documentary about the way he wrote those books. So he had a section at his home was just Shakespeare, and he had kind of some of the original work of Shakespeare, and he separated all other authors away from Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. And I think the guy was asking, so who come close? And it's like Shakespeare lives in the moon, and everybody else is out here.
Yeah, Shakespeare's great.
Yeah, so I feel like that's what you're saying. Like, these other guys up here, you cannot put them in the same club with anybody else.
Exactly.
In terms of intellect.
Exactly. And I've just admitted it's my personal reaction to them. I don't know any objective way to rank all of the other great thinkers. Yeah. And I love poetry and drama as well, and those people are brilliant, but in a little different way. And I admire them and I learn from them, but they're still not near. Yeah. What are my personal top four? And I should ask you what your top four are.
Man, I can't even give you my top fives. Okay, I would. You're probably going to be a little bit disappointed in this, but I would definitely put Plato up there, Aristotle up there, not Aquinas yet, because this is the first book I'm reading about him, so I'm not convinced yet that he's that brilliant.
You shouldn't be yet.
Yeah.
Because we're reading his mostly biography. Right?
Yep. And so, yeah, you're right. So I don't know what his thoughts look, because this is like secondhand. Somebody else is telling me what his thought is. Just the random guy, Chesterton. Yeah, nobody's thinking about it.
Nobody. Yeah.
So I'll put definitely Socrates, Plato, and thank you for you, Aristotle. I have to put John Stuart Mill.
I'm not surprised. And he's a good choice.
Yeah, and I definitely got to put Locke in there for me.
Yeah, I like Locke a lot.
On a top five. And I don't think I ever read the argument on individual freedom from anybody else better than Mill.
You're thinking of the book On Liberty primarily. And
he convinced me on that argument. And I think it's the right argument. I could be completely wrong, but
I agree with you. He's got the right argument. He's not the first to make it. We could go. Remember John Milton?
Yep.
Remember the Paradise Lost?
Yeah.
He also wrote about personal freedom and freedom of thought.
Okay.
at a critical time in 17th century England when free speech was definitely up for grabs because they had monarchs that could shut you up real fast.
Yeah.
And he stood forth as a famous author, and it's an interesting book he wrote. Areopagitica is what it's called, Latin word, but it's in English, but the title's Latin word.
Okay.
Areopagitica. It would be interesting for you particularly to go back in history and start picking out people who had
that type of argument
influenced Mill.
Yeah, I think that would be real good for me.
Yeah, and I certainly concur that Mill managed to bring it all together.
Yeah.
Right. In a wonderful package, and he's good writers most of the time. And so that's a good choice.
Yeah. I think Locke always has been interesting for me, his argument of how the government should function.
It's kind of like the basis of our society.
Yeah.
When we get done with ethics, we're going on to politics, and you'll be very interested in how many of the ideas our founding fathers got from him.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet, because I cannot remember how many books Madison read on that process of trying to do research on the Constitution.
Lots.
Yeah, so I cannot remember exactly the number, but I know it was a lot of reading.
Yep. And it was beyond just developing constitutions. It was trying to understand how political communities worked.
Yep.
And I think actually nobody's better than Aristotle of laying the foundations for that.
Yeah.
Now our founding fathers built on that beautifully. And let's hope that we can keep it together because it works.
Yeah, it's a republic. I hope we can keep it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good old Ben Franklin.
Yep. You might want to move on the other side, Professor. If the sun is good.
I'm always on the right side. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. I'm fine. I'm really good.
Oh man. So that's your top four. Okay. Good. I mean, I knew Socrates was on very, very on top of the list for you.
Gotta be.
And yeah, because that was my first introduction with Socrates. So I appreciate that.
Yep.
And he changed the way I think. Back to book 3, voluntary and involuntary virtue. Interesting idea.
Yep. So, and more complex than you might think. I mean, Aristotle really gets into the depths in analyzing that. What do you mean by voluntary? And what do you mean by involuntary? And of course, his early definition, at least, is voluntary if the source of the action comes from within you. That is your human nature. And it's involuntary if it comes via force outside you or ignorance.
Yep. And he put animals and children as their actions, because he also added decisions in there too. Their actions are involuntary because of the ignorance.
Correct. Yeah.
So you tell me animals don't think, Professor?
Not according to Aristotle. They don't. They don't deliberate, is what he really says.
Okay.
Because there are steps that happen. It's like you have the feeling.
Reason.
Yeah, the reason part is the deliberative part, where you consider alternatives. Prohairesis is the Greek word, which is to consider alternatives. So you know what the end is. You don't deliberate about that because we know you're supposed to be courageous.
Yeah.
All right. You don't deliberate, but what in this circumstance, and note that he recognizes that there are individual circumstances, and you can't make general rules. But in this circumstance, where you may be called upon to have courage, what are your options? That's the deliberation part. And that the deliberation ends with your will to do the actions that you've decided on in the deliberation to meet the end that you already know. That's the process. It's a very intellectual process.
Yeah.
And as he even points out himself, sometimes things happen so fast, there's almost no time for the deliberation part. But he says, that's if you've already got a settled virtue in courage, you maybe can shortcut the deliberation because you've had experience and you've become habituated to being courageous. And remember, for all these virtues, how do you get them?
Habituation.
Through habit, yes. So there are times when that deliberation shrinks to next to nothing, but you can fall back on your settled disposition to be courageous, right?
I almost feel like the voluntary virtue versus involuntary virtue, it's almost like the dichotomy of control type of thing, that you can control these because this is inside the voluntary virtue, and the involuntary virtue is things that you cannot control. Am I wrong?
I think you're right as far as you've gone. He would say that there's no such thing as involuntary virtue. If you didn't go through the steps and it was involuntary, and he gives a lot of situations where it could be involuntary. Let's take one that comes up in our society somewhat fairly often.
When you say steps, you're talking about feelings,
deliberation, will.
Okay.
That's all voluntary because that's driven by what's inside you, by your human nature.
Okay.
A concept we have to talk about at some point. Involuntary, it could be force, okay? So let's say I come up with you and say, Eric, I want you to, give me $5,000. And if you don't, I'm holding Jackie and Asante and Jada prisoner, and I'll harm them if you don't give me the $5,000. That's mostly involuntary.
Yeah.
Because any sensible man is going to turn over the $5,000.
Yep.
So you get no credit for that. The guy had a gun pointed at you. Or let's take this situation. You go out and you either take too many drugs or you drink too much, and then some awful things happen as a result of that. You don't know what you're doing, so you drive poorly and you get in an accident and you kill some other innocent people. Horrible thing. Well, that's involuntary in a sense, because in a drunken state, you're ignorant. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But however, you don't get off the hook on that. Why? You know that if you drink too much or take too many drugs, you're going to get into this state of ignorance.
Yeah.
And therefore, the fault of drinking too much or taking too many drugs is yours. So not only is there no virtue there, there's vice.
Yeah.
Right? So there's no involuntary virtue. All virtue is voluntary.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Action caused by ignorance versus action done in ignorance.
Okay, so he's identifying two different kinds of ignorance in a way. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, the by ignorance would be you drank too much. You made yourself ignorant. Through ignorance, you went out and you did some action and it turns out it's a felony, but you didn't know the law. And we have a legal rule in our society, inherited like most stuff from English legal system, where ignorance of the law is no excuse. So you did something, it turned out to be a felony, you got arrested, you go into court and said, gee, judge, that's in volume 47 of the combined federal code, and I just haven't read that. And the judge is going to say, tough luck.
Yeah, that's not an excuse.
That's not an excuse. Now, what's frightening, there's a very famous book called 3 Felonies a Day. Great scholar said, you, meaning all of us, on average, commit at least 3 felonies a day and don't even know it.
Is this book in your
Yes.
in the basement?
Yep.
I'm not buying it.
I'll give you a first shot at it. Give you a chance to defend yourself. I think that one will be going. So
okay.
I'll set it aside for you.
Okay. Thank you. Is ignorance a vice?
Well, remember, Aristotle doesn't talk about vices.
Yeah.
What he talks about is falling short of manifesting your human nature. It's a falling short,
Okay.
right? It's not like he portrays cowardice as a vice in a way, but he doesn't really say that. He says that's a falling short of
Bravery.
displaying bravery. Yes. So you can fall short of being, and again, it's a good time to bring this up. Why I don't think virtue is a good word. The Greek word is arete, A-R-E-T-E. Hopefully, Asante will be getting to that soon. It's an age-old Greek term. It was applied by Homer in the Iliad and the Odyssey. What it really means is excellence, right? Mm-hmm. So if we want you to be an excellent human being, Aristotle's already said the ideal life, the good we all should aim at is eudaimonia, which essentially is manifesting all of the excellence a human being can have. Mm. All of it. Now, how many people accomplish that? 0 is the answer.
But it's always good to aim to that.
That's what you should aim at. That's absolutely correct. So a falling short isn't the same thing as a vice to me.
Okay.
And also, if we're going to look at a bunch of characteristics of people, not things, characteristics of people in Book 4, and there's a couple in Book 5 too, that people translate that arete as virtue. But if you write what you think the virtues are, they won't match up very well with the things that Aristotle's talking about. Courage does, right? Mm. How about munificence? Would that be on your list?
What is it?
Munificence is, what would you do if you had an extraordinary amount of money? Right? Mm. Now, that's not on any of our lists. Maybe Elon Musk has it, I don't know. Pick somebody like that. But most people don't have that issue, right? Even generosity. What do you do with money? Mm. But that's not, look at the 10 Commandments. That's not on there. Mm. How about self-evaluation is an excellence. We'll see that in the next book. Would you have that on your list of virtues? You're good at self-evaluation?
No, because I always give myself A, or if not A plus.
Yeah, fortunately, there are people around who can.
I know people can give me different grades.
Me too. I have the same problem. I keep telling my wife, I'm perfect. Don't you understand that? She laughs a lot.
Yeah.
That's one, though, self-evaluation. How about high-mindedness?
Is that an intellect? No?
See, but we don't even have that concept hardly. In fact, some of these, Aristotle says, these excellences don't have names. Yeah. I'm gonna maybe make one up, or maybe he doesn't. He just says it's somewhere between these two things. So excellence is it, and deeper than that, and we might as well talk about human nature. We have to now go read his Metaphysics to find out about this. Another one little challenge of Aristotle. Every living kind of thing has a nature. Okay? Things that aren't alive don't have a nature because their actions are all exterior to them. So a clod of dirt can get blown around by the wind. It can't decide it's going to, head south for the winter or something like that. So we don't even consider it as having a nature. But all living things, all living kinds of things, it's not individuals. It's not like you have a nature and I have a nature and Bill has a nature and Jackie has a nature. Yeah. We're all human beings. The kind is human. And like also kind is tree, kind is cat, so on. So every one of those has a nature and it's inherent. Okay, so let me define nature the way Aristotle does. Your nature is an inner principle of motion and stasis. Okay, inner principle means it comes from inside you.
Okay.
Okay, and motion and stasis are actions, interior actions that you might take, okay, or not take.
You say interior actions?
Yes,
So like feelings?
that's part of it.
Okay.
But let me give you a better example. So all human beings, and I'm going to use Aquinas's name for this, not Aristotle's. All human beings need water to survive. That's part of your inner principle. I have to have enough water because our body's what? 80, 90% water.
Mm-hmm.
So nature, my inner nature produces thirst, which tells me go get some water, right? As we both go for our water jugs.
I'm doing right now.
Yep. Or my inner nature creates the inclination in me of hunger. So now we can head for McDonald's, right? Or my inner nature says, I'm in my reproductive age, and there are inclinations that go with that. Mm-hmm. So we have all these inclinations driven by an internal source. And let me take a simpler example. Oak trees. We've all seen there are oak trees all over. Walk through East Park. It's almost all oak trees now. We've all seen acorns. They're laying around on the ground. They've fallen off another oak tree. What happens with the acorn? If it finds suitable soil wherever it lands, and there's enough water, and it's warm enough, and there's enough airflow, what happens? It buries itself by its own weight, basically, into the ground, and then a whole bunch of interesting steps happen. Acorns are hard when you pick them up off the ground. The water softens them, that hard shell disappears. Then something about its inner nature drives down roots, right? Where does that come from? Mm. Not only that, it's being successful driving down roots so it can get nutrition. That's what it's doing that for. It will force up we call it a sapling. It's an early little projection up above the surface with special leaves on them. They're not the same leaves they'll have when they get to be 150 feet tall. They're special leaves in that they're particularly effective at photosynthesis, that is changing sunlight into energy, and that starts giving energy along with the nutrients that the roots are picking up, and it can start making the interior of an oak tree. Now, I'm not a good enough biologist to be able to tell you what that's all about, but trees and bushes and other plants have ways of transporting nutrition in fluid up and down all the time, right? And so such a simple thing as a acorn has within it an inner principle of motion and stasis. And that's how it gets to be a huge oak tree. And it's striving, if everything goes well, to be a perfect oak tree, whatever that might be, right? Same thing goes on with human beings, right? Except there's this little complicating factor. We can produce our own inner principles sometimes, and it causes us generally to go astray. So Aristotle counts on that heavily. He says we have a nature. There are explicit things that go with the nature, and to live a eudaimonic life, a well-lived life, we need to perfectly manifest that human nature, whatever it is. And then he's trying to sort out what it is for us. Okay, which I think is a magnificent way of understanding all of that stuff. It's helped me a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm debating if I should ask this question. We might go down the rabbit hole.
That's all right. You've got an edit button.
That's true. When you're talking about nature, thinking about nature, God, and I'm thinking about as human being, we are given the nature. This is God creation.
And including us.
And including us. Then can human beings really hurt nature?
Sure.
Like, but can we destroy nature completely?
Didn't you see that latest Russian bomb?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we can.
See,
and that's not the
right.
worst thing that could happen to us.
Right. I didn't think about that when I'm thinking about nature. Yeah, you're right.
That's nature turning against nature.
Yeah.
And it happens in 1,000 minor ways every day.
Yeah.
The way we treat each other sometimes, or we treat the natural world around us.
That's true.
I think it was Scotland, may have been Wales or England, someplace in Great Britain. Cut down 17 million acres of trees to put up windmills.
Ooh.
Talk about destroying nature.
Yeah. I'm sure God is not happy about that.
I wouldn't think so.
Now I'm thinking about a different question when you are explaining. What do you think, and you probably not going to care about this question that much. What do you think about, what was Aristotle's intent in writing these two books?
Yeah, I care about that question a lot because I think about it a lot. His intent was to help us understand human nature and how that provides, he literally uses the word target. Remember back in book 1? A target to aim at in our life, if we stop and think about what we're doing. But it also, he wants to explain, because he thinks, and I think he's right, part of human nature is that we're social animals. We like to live with other people. And there's some practical reasons for that, but even if they weren't true, he says, we'd still want to live together because we like to hang out together.
Yeah.
In other words, by nature, we're social.
Yeah.
More or less. So he'd like to understand and help us understand what kind of community, political community I'm talking about, and some place down the road we'll talk about what's the difference between a political community and others. But political community that is one with the government where we make laws, okay? So what's the best kind that will give us the best opportunity to manifest human nature perfectly? In other words, to live a good life. So those two go together that way. One is the goal of living the best possible life, and the other is what do you have to do to get there?
Yeah.
So Robinson Crusoe cannot live the perfect human life.
Who?
Robinson Crusoe. He's the guy that was stranded on the island.
Oh.
So he was just one guy.
Yeah.
And so he has no chance, right? Because there are many forms of human excellence that involve interaction.
Yeah.
Right? And he can't have any of those because there's nobody to interact with. Well.
And you don't even have books.
I think he had at least a Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Because the ship crashed, and as the story goes, and it's a fascinating story, recommend it. Ship crashes close to shore because it crashed on some rocks. Everybody else was killed, but the ship's still there, and it's still filled with lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think included in that, like in the captain's quarters, there was a Bible or something. So I don't think he was totally bereft. No kidding. Especially when after like 20 years, he's walking along the beach and sees some footprints that aren't his. It's a great story. It's a really great story. And so I recommend it. Maybe we'll get to it in our.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this too. Maybe those threads you are putting together, that might be a worth a podcast too.
We could do that if you wanted.
We can definitely, because I'm super fascinated about. I mean, fascinated. I wouldn't say I'm terrified, but because like I told you before, if we know every society collapse, and we know our society is going to collapse, it's the matter of when
Right.
that would happen.
Correct.
I'm not terrified about that idea. It's almost like death, because I know it's coming.
It's inevitable.
Yeah. It's coming. So I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna be here, or my grandkids will be here, it's almost like teaching them how to rebuild the society back up.
Yep.
Yeah. Beliefs are divided into true and false, not into good and bad.
Correct.
But decisions are divided into good and bad,
Right.
more than into true and false.
Yep. Beliefs are statements about how the world is. Right? Any political belief you care to have, if you're at one side, you think, we're spending too much money as a government, and the other side, well, we're not spending enough because we've got these other needs over there. Those are beliefs. Mm-hmm. Okay? They can only be true or false. On the other hand, we really have wishes. This is the way I would like it to be. And interestingly, in this same conversation about how much money we're spending, each side could have the wish that we should spend just the right amount of money to make our society work the best, but have two very different beliefs about where we are. And that's a lot of what political disagreement's about. And the good news is, in a way, it may be easier to talk to each other about beliefs because we can appeal to the real world if we understand the real world well enough. In this case, economics. Then, what our wishes are for the world. Like, I wish we'd always have peace. Well, everybody wishes we always have peace.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do to get there?
Do you think, now you trigger something in my mind, do you think conflict is not the end goal? I mean, most of us, it's not the end goal, it's just the means to get there? Like you say, everybody wants peace, but how do we make sure the world is in peace is where we disagree on.
Yeah, but we also may and do disagree. What does peace mean?
Oh yeah, true.
So we can have disagreements about the ends. What we disagree certainly also about what the perfect amount of spending is in our society. Yeah. So and that's interesting because what the ends are Socratic questions. Right? What the means are they're not really scientific, it's the wrong word, but are more objective. So you can imagine Plato writing a dialogue about what does peace mean. Greek playwrights did write plays like that.
It's the brave new world we all want to live in, but how to get there is where we...
Well, it's simple. You go to room 101. There's all the answers.
That's what everybody's like, oh man, that's a good world to live in, but realistically to get there, man, it's a whole different ball game.
I don't know. We can get towards 1984 without much trouble. It's the other end of it that we want.
Yeah. I mean, that's true.
Yeah. So,
I mean, 1984 is a scary thing.
Yes, it is.
How do you know you have true beliefs?
Oh, what a wonderful question. We better go get some food first. We're going to be here for a long time. Well, there's many approaches to that, obviously. Science is the one that dominates our society. But you notice that's faltering.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Just to give you a few examples, submissions to the best scientific journals, which are reviewed before they're printed by practitioners of those sciences, whichever ones they are, and declared by those people to be sound studies, and they should be published in this prestigious journal.
Yeah.
Half of them don't work.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Oh, yeah.
And we make so many decisions based on science, and to know that there's only a 50-50 chance that might be true,
Yes, yeah.
you might as well throw darts.
Oh, yeah. And that water guy was so muddy during COVID.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, it just made a lot of people, even if you pro shot or you against shot, it made a lot of people very skeptical about the scientific information.
And especially about medical science.
Yes.
Which, we sort of always have had a default value.
Yep.
If I'm sick, I'll go see the doctor, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I worked in a hospital for 30 years. They'll tell you they don't anyway, because human physiology is so terribly complicated. But then you get, if there's a bias in there somewhere, and that's part of the COVID issue.
Yeah. So
how do you find out what truth is?
yeah, yep. How you find this is true and this is what you need to believe.
It is a lifetime work, and my best advice is read books by people you think might know what the truth is, and then you have the chore of evaluating what they say. And when you're a beginner, I can remember reading stuff in high school. I thought it was just the greatest stuff I'd ever run across. But I didn't know anything. I had no really good way to evaluate.
That's the danger, though, Professor.
That's the danger.
In today's world, because my biggest fear is for the young people to get the wrong foundation.
Right. I agree.
And you put the wrong type of books, and trust me, I'm a libertarian when it comes to that type of stuff. I want a freedom for the kids to read, but I also know there's appropriate age for them to get certain books. If you put the wrong books on a kid's hands at early age, you can build the wrong foundation for them, and it's going to be really, really tough to change that.
Yeah. What makes it worse is if they're hearing the same stuff in the books from their teachers.
Yes.
Here's the thing about teachers, and I used to go first day of class. All your life, you've been in school. I taught mostly freshmen and sophomores. You've been in school now for, 13 years?
Yeah, will be.
13 years.
Freshman year.
How do you know what the right answer is? It's the one that the teacher doesn't put a red check by. So as long as there's no red check there, that's the right answer. And the teacher knows what the right answer always is because she's grading the papers or he's grading the papers.
Yeah.
So teachers, you conclude from that, inductive logic, you conclude from that, teachers are always right.
Yeah.
So I had to tell the class, and it didn't sink in very much to too many, I'm a teacher. I know I'm not always right. Don't you believe that I know what's always right? If you disagree, I want to hear about it. And then I'll send you to the principal's office and we'll forget about that. No, but
that will be the end of the class.
That'll be the end of the class for you.
Yeah.
No, because inevitably in the classes I enjoyed teaching the most were ones where we conversed about issues, not I'm going to tell you what the truth is.
And I think that's the most important. I was talking to Asante about this last week. I don't know what conversation we were having. And I was like, man, most great men in the world and in history are made. Most great men are made. They are not self-created. And they are made because either they had good mentorship, somebody put the right books in front of them, they had good classical education.
There you go.
So I was telling him, I'm like, man, every book I put on your hands is strategic. I'm not just throwing in a book for you to read.
Right.
These books are building blocks for you.
Exactly.
And then they might not make a lot of sense right now. I'm like, grab the Plato dialogue. Just read it. Half of that maybe 90% of that might not make sense to you.
Right.
But you might gravitate on one line, and you might come to me and say, what's that don't make sense. That's when the wheels start turning. Also, man, if you put the wrong weak foundation on our kids, just teach them to answer the question yes and no, we'll be in trouble.
Yep. And the way you typically have gotten around that in the past is we have students write essays.
Yeah. There you go.
So that accomplishes a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's how to organize your thinking, how to express yourself. It's the rhetoric part of Asante's education. So great. So we had an antidote for the choose one of these four is the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple
Yeah.
choice tests. And now what's happened? Write an essay and turn it in. Where did they get the essay? Did they write it? ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT doing all the work.
Doing the work. And they have no way to evaluate it.
No, that's why I think we just need to, I think this is the gift from the sky, man. We just need to get back to Socratic method. Let's sit around the classroom and have conversation.
There you go. That's the way it should be.
Yep.
Even youngsters.
Oh, yeah.
And Asante will tell you
Mm-hmm.
that works really well.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, why you think that? And then we can just bounce back and forth like you're throwing tennis ball and see how that played out. When I was reading book 3, I started thinking, can a Stoic be a good politician? I think we can put away Marcus Aurelius because he's an exception to the rule.
It's almost even hard to think of him as a politician because an emperor, you don't have a lot of political machinations going on. So, and he was out fighting all the time. I mean, he didn't want to be, but he's having trouble with the Dacians, and you know how troublesome they are.
Mm-hmm.
Can a Stoic be a good politician? I think so.
Okay.
I don't see anything that would inhibit you from being any more than if you're a good Platonist or a good Socratic person or a good John Stuart Mill person, because all of those presume serious thought about issues.
Okay. What's the difference between a politician and a statesman?
Politicians looking for votes, a statesman's looking for the welfare of the people he's leading.
Okay.
That's why I've started calling our friend a statesman, not a politician.
Oh, man. Professor, I don't think I got a... Oh, Jesus, already... Oh, yeah, it's already an hour.
About an hour and a half.
Yeah.
We're just getting warmed up, man.
I know.
That's the beauty of this.
Yeah.
We could go all night.
Oh, yeah. People who wasting their days on trivia things are called babblers. I will close it out with that.
It's bubblegum talk, my friend. We know what that is.
and you know, most of these guys, they really didn't have... Is it they did not have time for trivia conversation? Was these conversations that they were having was more important? Why? Because we have a lot of trivia conversation today. But these guys, seems like most of their conversation was serious.
Well,
even the Inklings.
Remember, what we're seeing is the ones that are reported to us by people who like serious conversations. So, you know, Socrates didn't go somewhere for bubblegum talk.
Yeah.
Right? Plato didn't go somewhere for bubblegum talk. He's not going to report bubblegum talk, except as some of the more humorous characters, like Euthyphro sometimes, in the dialogues. He doesn't say it, but this guy's just bubblegum talk. And the same thing, the Inklings. I mean, they got around, they were talking about serious things.
Yeah.
Right? But, you know, they hung out with each other. And so what they talked about, and they produced all these wonderful writings as well. So I'm not sure that the percentage of bubblegum talk has changed all that much.
Okay.
Right? The more we find out as historians about just everyday people in the world by various means, court records and whatnot, the more it appears that the distribution's about the same.
Oh, okay.
Now, I think, my personal opinion, is there would be collections of people who were interested about really serious things and had a wider influence, like Athens in the 5th century BC and part of the 4th century too.
Yeah.
So the general conversational level might have been higher, but I almost bet, well, I know this. Well, I don't either, so I won't bet that. I was going to say Socrates probably didn't go to the assembly where all the citizens could get together to vote on the laws. But he did, because one time he got to be president of the assembly, and he made a ruling that got himself in all kinds of trouble. But that's, life of Socrates.
Yeah.
Because he was upholding the traditional laws of Athens, as you'd expect him to do. People didn't like that because they were intent on...
Oh, is that your phone?
Yeah, it's my phone. I forgot I had it with me.
I was about to say it's not mine.
Yeah, I was going to say, did a band
Mine. No, I was about to say mine is off. Yeah.
Let me see what's up.
Betsy's looking for you.
Undoubtedly. Because I have an errand I'm supposed to be doing after we get done.
Oh.
She probably left a message. Now, the next thing is, can I figure out how to use it? I'm still in...
Still in the process.
Betsy, missed call. Okay. I can't see either other than that.
Oh.
I'm doing well. All right, let's look for call.
What do you got, iPhone?
Yeah. But I can't see, so I got to get... Now I have to get my glasses out.
Okay.
This is coming for you next.
I know.
Be ready.
Well, thanks, Professor.
Thank you, Eric. It's been delightful as always.
Until next time, Book 4 coming up next.
It is.
All right, sir.
I'll be ready.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Take care, my friend.
All right. Bye.